feels like he's been under a lot of scrutiny really since he was picked, right? Especially because, him, Aiden Hutchinson, there was that debate there. Kayvon Thibodeau was in that class as well. They go with they go with Travon Walker at number 1, and Hutchinson certainly to this point in time, even before this year began, was giving much greater return on investment. Now he had a really hot start to the year as well. So it just makes that Travon Walker pick like, the Jags sure could use a guy like that right now. And they were hoping that Walker could be that player. He was, or maybe not in the way that Hutchinson is, but he was incredibly impactful to a career high level that we had against the Colts in Week 5. 90.4 overall grade. That was the single game career high for Travon Walker. 7 pressures. Also a single game career high for him. Had an 84.2 pass rush grade, which is the second highest of his career. And then he had an 18.4 pass rush win percentage, which was the 4th highest of his career. So no matter how you slice it, this guy was getting into the backfield and creating havoc at a higher level than he had at this point of his career. So Ollie, when you went back and you watched Travon Walker's day, is this something where you think that this is really repeatable? Was it maybe just a matchup that he was going up against the Colts offensive lineman? Is he progressing to a level where we can expect top-tier play from him moving forward? What's your overall thoughts on how Travon Walker played this week?
Yeah, I thought he played really well. And the number one thing that jumps out of Walker every time you put the film on is just the effort. He really does bring it every single down. He's playing so much. I think only TJ Watt has played more snaps than him as an edge defender this year. So even when you get to like the 4th quarter, he is still motoring and driving off the ball at a really impressive level. So that's just kind of one thing. And we are at this point now where it's just kind of like a sunk cost thing to expect him to be Aiden Hutchinson or a top tier, top 10, top 12 pass rusher. I just think we're almost beyond that point. Can he have seasons and games where he can take over and be really impactful? And can he have a year where he gets 12, 13, 14 sacks? I think there's a plausible path to that. But him being like a dictate the terms of the game to the offense type pass rusher, I think we're just beyond that. But what's really interesting with him this season is the Jags defensively, and it's no shot at Ryan Nielsen, who has been a good defensive guy around the league. They do nothing to help their guys out. You just go through the film, the figures, whatever you want. They don't blitz. They don't sim. They don't even stunt. You would think Travon Walker, what would be the number one thing we could do with Travon Walker, right, is worst case scenario, the effort, the power, we'll dive bomb him inside one time, we'll let him go outside the other time, right? That'd be like the staple go-to, put him in a Jets, Niners type system. Maybe he can cook and be a pressure type guy for us. They don't really do any of that either. They're like, bottom 3 in the league in almost every single category you look at of where can we get some extra juice up front. And the 3 times he did it against the Colts was when he was really disruptive swooping inside, and yet they just don't go to it. So this was a straight up like one-on-one tape. He's rushing off the left side almost the entire game. And so you're getting one-on-one true dropbacks. Let's find out who this guy is. And it was a really impressive performance in terms of speed to power, setting up one style of move in the first half, then try to change it in the second half to try and throw off the tackle he was facing. So it was, with what he's asked to do, that is as high and as strong as a performance that I think you can expect from him.
Yeah, I like that you pointed out that it feels like they need to be more creative along the defensive line, because I agree with you. I think it was 3 of those 7 pressures came from him being the looper on a crash, where he was coming from the outside and he was going on the inside, and it's really tough for centers and guards to pick him up, because where you start with Travon Walker, and this is where you started with his scouting report as well, I just think that he does it, at a more consistent level, is the speed to power stuff. I mean, the dude is, all Trent Baalke jokes aside with like, oh, he only drafts athletes, whatever, never actually looks at the tape, he just goes to the combine results. But Travon Walker, the speed to power that this guy has and the explosiveness that he has at his size, it is rare. He is built like a player that you would draft number 1 overall. So that part, like, again, all jokes aside, you get it. Like, you can understand what their thinking was here. And a lot of his pressures in this game came from he just has this unstoppable speed to power, explosiveness, and strength. I mean, it is so imposing. There's so few offensive tackles in the NFL that can really stop it. You can get some guys that might be really great at an anchor technique and might have their hands in really great positions to be able to use natural leverage to maybe slow him down enough or stop him. But truly stop him, I think the list is very, very small, single digits. Maybe you can even count it on one hand. And so this past week, I thought was just a great example of him continuing to use his strength of that speed to power and kind of impose his will throughout the entire game. I will say this, when I watched Walker, and I think that it's worth praising, and I think that he did a great job. But I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, where do we go from here? Where do we go from, all right, you had a good game. How do we get more of this out of you? Is it a situation where we put you in a similar spot to like what the Lions do with Hutchinson, right? Where we talked about that, where Hutchinson, kind of aligned as a wide 7. You've got a 3 technique defensive tackle to his side to allocate both the center and the guard. You've got now the offensive tackle on an island, and he's got to try to go out and get Hutchinson. And if he oversets, he's going to hit him with the inside spin. And if he doesn't get to the edge, well, Hutchinson's just going to be able to 2-hand swipe or club rip or whatever to the outside shoulder. At the end of the game, I noticed there were a couple of opportunities where Travon Walker had the ability to do that, and he could hit that nasty little crossover, sort of cross-the-face inside move, which could be helpful. But I don't know if they're going to ever go to that, because you do have Josh Hines-Allen on the other side, right? I mean, and he is the more productive pass rusher for you. So if you're really going to set anybody up, you're going to set up the guy who you know is going to give you a good return on investment. So for Walker, when I was watching him too, this stood out. He's not really winning with pass rush moves, right? I mean, like there's not this arsenal of different types of swipes and move combinations where he's staying super clean, right? I think Hutchinson does a great job of that. TJ Watt does a great job of that. Latu did such a great job of that when he was coming out of UCLA. It's just the guys never let you get clean hands on them. Their hands are always moving in a certain way where, okay, I knocked the hand away and now you're trying to recover, but okay, now I have another move for the other hand, and it's just they're sort of one step ahead with their hand fighting. Walker's not really doing that. I didn't see a ton of moves from him to say, okay, yes, that worked. Go to that. Let's set that up more often. Not that he doesn't have moves at all. But again, he won, in my opinion, off of athleticism in this past game. And it was just too imposing for what the Colts wanted to do. And to me, I don't know about you. I'm curious if you have an answer for this. Is there a certain way that you set that up? Maybe outside of just running more stunts, which you already said you kind of want to see from them. But is there a way you set up that type of a player to be more productive on a regular basis the way that he was this past weekend?
It's a tricky one because they tried this last year. They were way more multiple. They gave him plenty of opportunities. And outside of really, there was a Ravens game last year where he played really, really well. It just was not consistent enough to say, okay, like you said, let's allocate our front structure to get the most out of this play. And you could say maybe they should because it's the number 1 overall pick. But, we're comfortably into his career now, where, as you said, they got a better player on the other side. If you're going to do anything to manipulate your front, to manipulate protections, to get to one of the most advantageous matchup, it probably isn't going to be him. So it's a tricky one because it doesn't mean from last season to this year, he's not developed as a player where you could try it again, right? He's not exactly the same player frozen in amber as he was last year as he is this year. The one thing I have noticed about his game, which I think is encouraging, but is also a demerit in some senses because of the way that they're asking him to play at the moment, he's got way more nuance with how he gets the power. I get it's like the only move, it's the only way to win, it's the go-to move, but he does a really nice job now with his feet, with how he manipulates his body, with hitting some of these like hesitation steps to kind of position himself and position his rush path to get the opposing lineman to open up, and then he can just go into attack mode. And he's got really good timing now with the punch in the feet. Whereas before it was kind of all over the place, and I'll just run through a brick wall, and I'm just, bigger, faster, stronger than everyone else. So at least now there's nuance to how he's getting to the move he knows he can win with. It's just not going to be, like we said, a dynamic weekly difference make with all these different moves. And the problem with how they're playing, he's regularly so tight to the formation that you'll see him come off the line. He has to kind of extend where he is off the line, right, to try and get onto this more diagonal plane we've discussed before to get to that power stuff. So he's taking multiple steps to get to his move, and the ball's out, right? So he's become more of a nuanced rusher with what he does well, how he wants to win, but it's taking so long based on alignment that it ends up like not really impacting the play a whole bunch. So it's a tricky one. Honestly, it's as simple to me as like, if they'd lost this game and it became a situation in the building, could you deal him somewhere? Could you get him to New York? Could you get him to San Francisco? He just makes way more sense to me as a rotational guy who puts in a ton of effort defending the run. And then you can just have him, as we said, be a more part of a pass rush machine than it is like there's our one-on-one go and win guy.
Yeah, I think that was sort of my takeaway too. Not to throw cold water on it, but he did. It's hard to think that the Jags will set him up to have games like that more often. Like you said, like we've just talked about here, if you're going to set somebody else, it feels like you're going to set up Hines Allen. And the expectations with him in Jacksonville, I think that if you sort of reprogram your brain and say, all right, this isn't necessarily the number one overall pick, this is just somebody who's a really good edge two for us, he's got some rare power, maybe that's just the appropriate way that you need to be looking at it. And he can give you a handful of games a year, hopefully, where he's able to have a major impact the way that he was this past week. Because if it did, going back to giving him credit, it felt like he was unblockable on those speed to power reps. I mean, he is, I think that he is so clean too at getting off the line of scrimmage with so much power. I mean, he comes from that 4-point stance a lot, right? Where he will have both hands in the ground, his head will be low, his shoulder pads will be low, and then there's not a lot of pre-snap jitters from him. Like sometimes I'll watch pass rushers at the college level, even really good ones, and honestly, sometimes this is worse than the really good ones because they know they can get away from it, or they can get away with it, and like their feet will be moving like the whole time, like before the ball is snapped, and then eventually you're probably firing off of your back foot as your first push foot. But with Walker, he's down in his stance, he's in that 4-point stance, he's looking at the football, and the second it moves, he explodes off of the front foot. And there is not a inch of wasted movement between him getting off the ball and getting into his full power. So that stuff I think has become really clean for him to say, okay, if power is how you win, let's make sure that you are as powerful as possible on every single snap. And I think he is really comfortable at being able to do that. Any other Jags defensive line or Travon Walker thoughts before we move on to the next one?
No, just on Walker, lastly, you said, yeah, we should give him some credit. We threw some cold water there on what was his career day, but you notice this with a bunch of rushes that there's different ways to play through contact, particularly with guys who get off the line as well, as you just mentioned there, where there's guys who are just so springy off the ball, right? There's guys like Hutchinson, Garrett, the real special ones who maintain all their speed and power through contact. They can just rip through people. It's like nothing was in their way. And then the really, really special next level, and some guys have the first one and the third one, right, is accelerating off contact. Can you close? And this has been a thing with the Jags forever, to the point of is something wrong with the way we're measuring all this stuff, where they are regularly really, really high in pressure rate every year? They change players, they change coordinators, they're always really high in pressure rate. They're always at the bottom end of the sack rate total. And the hope with Walker, right, is that can he be the guy who can finish for you, finish plays, we can boost the sack rate some. It was really disappointing to start the season. With him, you do see the acceleration off contact. Mm-hmm. He does not get stopped on contact, as you mentioned. The speed to power is incredible. His ability to absorb it and then fire off it and to create this second surge of acceleration where you are back into a full sprint right away. That is not normal stuff. That is like when you said he has the body type, the profile of a number one overall pick. That's the kind of thing people are looking for, is there's certain plays where it takes them a beat to get back up to speed, right? Coming off the contacts of even if they win. And that's how you close. That's how you finish with him. When you start going through, as you mentioned, the brick by brick of how do you build this player out, I do think we're seeing more of it. It's just so into one box that he does this thing. And that makes him more of a guy who is an A+ every coach wants in a pass rush group, but it's just not a guy who takes over games every single week.
By the way, I was looking it up when you were talking before. Keion White also has more snaps than Trayvon Walker, but Walker is third, so it doesn't take away from your point. He's on the field a ton. And like you said, the effort, the power, the length, everything, the body type, it's why you want him on the field as much as possible. So only TJ Watt and Keion White are the two players who have more snaps at the edge position than Trayvon Walker.